westernmost of the United States of America, welcomes Vice President and Mrs. Lyndon B. Johnson. The American leader is en route to visit 6 nations of Asia. He was asked to undertake this journey for understanding by President John F. Kennedy. During his brief stay in Hawaii, Mr. Johnson helps dedicate an East-West Cultural Center at the university. He himself introduced the legislation in Washington which helped to establish this institution, a place for men of learning from Asia and America. Westward now, across the Pacific. Vice President Johnson's first destination is the capital of the Republic of Vietnam, Saigon. The visitors are met at the foot of the ramp by United States Ambassador Frederick Nolting. The ambassador accompanies Mr. Johnson to his greeting by Vice President Nguyen Ngoc To. A friendly greeting, led by youth groups, awaits the American party. President Kennedy's youngest sister, Mrs. Stephen Smith, is accompanying the Johnsons on this Asian journey. Vice President Johnson tells the Vietnamese people, "I want to hear your ideas and to tell you mine, so that together we may find better ways to preserve the independence and security of your nation." He desires to meet not only heads of state, but as many of the people as he can. At several points along the route of his motorcade into the city of Saigon, Mr. Johnson halts his car and goes among the people to shake their hands and to speak with them. At the Hotel Majestic in Saigon, a reception, one of many, is held for the Vice President of the United States. The people soon discover what a friendly person he is. He receives guests with genuine interest. Next morning in Saigon, the United States Vice President has an appointment at Independence Palace. He comes here to meet President Ngo Dinh Diem. To each chief of state whom he will meet, he brings a personal message from President Kennedy. His meeting with President Diem prompts Mr. Johnson to remark, "There is complete meeting of the minds on President Kennedy's and President Diem's ideas on what ought to be done and how to do it." The Vietnam National Assembly also awaits the American Vice President. Mr. Johnson, who has a long and outstanding record as a legislator, feels at home in surroundings like these. The Assembly's leaders greet him at the entrance, and its president reminds him, "Your nation has shown friendship to the Vietnamese right from the difficult hours when our nation had just recovered her independence, and you have helped us to build up a stable and strong republic." Mr. Johnson tells the Assembly of his nation's profound sense of responsibility to the cause of human freedom. For the progress of all mankind, human liberty must be and will be preserved. Free men, the United States leader declares, will win the ultimate victory. The American Vice President expresses again and again his admiration for the fortitude of the Vietnamese people in winning and maintaining their freedom. To visit the countryside, Mr. Johnson crosses the modern bridge over the Saigon River. He travels along the newly built Saigon-Ben Hoa Highway. The American Vice President mingles with men and women at a housing project. He hears them tell of their lives and aspirations. In a pasture, he exhibits an alert sense of prudence. A textile factory makes another stop. We have a saying back in my home state of Texas, he tells his hosts, that you can look into a man's eyes and see what is in his heart. I think I know what is in the hearts of the Vietnamese people. They love liberty and treasure their freedom. In the city and the country, crowds gather to greet Mr. Johnson. In his farewell statement, he declares that free men will win the struggle to preserve freedom and bring a day of universal peace for all mankind. Together, there is nothing that can defeat us. From the people of Vietnam, the American Vice President has received warmth and hospitality. From Saigon, the journey continues to Manila. The capital of the Republic of the Philippines erupts with enthusiasm for the American Vice President. From Manila International Airport to Malacañang Palace, where the state guests will stay, large, friendly crowds throng the streets. To Mr. Johnson, people really matter. At Malacañang Palace, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson accompany Foreign Secretary Serrano to a meeting with President and Mrs. Carlos P. Garcia. The Congress of the Philippines meets in joint session to hear an address by the American Vice President. America will continue to march with you, he declares, in the war against poverty, illiteracy, and disease. We stand with and beside the people of Asia so that peace, justice, and freedom will prevail. After a busy schedule, the time comes to leave Manila. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson fly north to Taipei. The welcome of the people of the Free Republic of China presents another thrilling spectacle on Mr. Johnson's tour. The motorcade route is lined with cheering thousands. The open limousine in which he rides stops repeatedly as swarms of men, women, and children eagerly seek to shake his hand. Mr. Johnson gets out of the car and walks among the crowd, showing special attention to the children. Later, at the executive residence, The Vice President and his party call on President and Madam Chiang Kai-shek. Mr. Johnson assures his host that there will be no compromise of the honorable ties that bind their two peoples together. During his stay on Taiwan, Mr. Johnson talks with and to many people, to boys and girls, to workers and farmers. One man, but he expresses America's interest in them and their future. In front of Taipei's City Hall, he speaks to college and university students. He challenges them to do the things that need doing to make life better among our fellow men. A meeting of people, a meeting of minds, produces another instructive rendezvous on his Asian journey. At the airport, more farewells. From Taipei, he flies toward the mainland. At Hong Kong, renowned for its beautiful harbor, there's a short layover while the plane is refueled. Then on to Bangkok, capital of Thailand. At Don Mueang Airport, Prime Minister Sarit Thanarat welcomes him and Mrs. Johnson. We hope to learn what we need to know about the problems of the world as you see them, the American tells his Thailand hosts. Later, at Government House, a formal reception is given in his honor, and Mr. Johnson sees many people with whom he wishes to talk. A special entertainment has been prepared for the American guests at the Government House Theater, a select program of classical Thai dances. The dancers represent one of the grandest and oldest traditions of dancing style. A sightseeing tour along the Chaho Phraya River provides another highlight for America's Vice President. With a guide to explain them, the U.S. party views the landmarks of Bangkok. United States Ambassador Kenneth Young accompanies him too, but typically the American Vice President wishes most of all to meet with the people who live along the banks of the river. He disembarks at one of the landings in order to go among the people. In their homes, he receives warm hospitality and enjoys animated conversations with the help of his interpreter. He has journeyed far in his quest for information and understanding. The opinions and the dignity of individual human beings remain most important to him. Bangkok, of course, is headquarters of the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, an international grouping in which 8 nations cooperate to work for peace. Mr. Johnson pays a call to talk with members of its staff. During his conversations with the leaders of SEATO, he discusses education, health, and standards of living. He re-emphasizes America's desire to preserve world peace. He expresses the hope that his mission will be rewarding to all men and women who treasure liberty, for themselves and their fellow man. A new steam turbine plant for the production of electric power also draws Mr. Johnson. He comes to attend its formal opening. Back in his own country, he has been a leader in the field of rural electrification. The Prime Minister lights candles in obeisance to the Triple Gem. Mr. Johnson speaks briefly to commend Thailand's people for bringing electricity into more homes and factories. The Prime Minister pushes a button and the new steam turbine plant is officially opened, an industrial milestone for Thailand. Another chapter in Vice President Johnson's Asian journey concludes. Other nations, other people still await him. Everywhere he goes, he urges that nations as well as people adopt the principle common to many cultures. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Westward again, his plane flies to New Delhi. India's Vice President Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru both greet him at the airport. Our paths sometimes differ, Mr. Johnson declares, but we have the same objectives, to achieve economic development and world peace. At the Presidential Palace in New Delhi, Mr. Johnson receives a formal welcome from India's President Rajendra Prasad. The American Party makes one of its first calls in India at the Raj Ghat, a site sacred to the memory of the late Mohandas K. Gandhi. With reverence and respect, they come to salute a man and his work renowned the world over. Mr. Johnson places a wreath in remembrance of Gandhi, loved and admired for his greatness of spirit and his compassion for all living creatures. Again and again in the Indian capital, Mr. Johnson seeks to get close to the people. He pleases them by his interest in their well-being. Touring the countryside, he enjoys meeting people of rural India. Mr. Johnson was once a farm boy in America, and he feels at home on the land. At one of his stops, he lays the foundation stone for an engineering college, something that will remain long after he is gone, something that will better other people's lives. Back in New Delhi, Mr. Johnson speaks to an airport crowd that has come to bid him goodbye. 2 days in India have left him with a sense of accomplishment and a feeling that even a better understanding can now flourish. From New Delhi, destination Karachi, the last stop on his Asian journey. The people of Pakistan give him a wonderfully warm reception. During his ride into the capital, he stops many times to get acquainted with men, women, and children along his route. Everywhere, crowds, friendly crowds, and whenever he stops, expanding crowds. At Presidential Palace, the President of Pakistan, Field Marshal Muhammad Ayub Khan, receives him. Pakistan's chief executive plans soon to visit the United States. In connection with this, Vice President Johnson extends a personal invitation to him to visit the Johnson Ranch in Texas, where the weather is very much like that of Pakistan. Among the calls that Mr. Johnson makes in Karachi is this one to the naval establishment. The commanding officer and his top lieutenants have arranged a special review for their distinguished guest. He goes aboard a ship that will take him on a trip through the harbor. the vessel steams past the waterfront. It's an excursion that both pleases Mr. Johnson and affords him a look at this nation's naval units. But people, always people, interest him more than anything else. Everywhere he goes, crowds and enthusiasm flow toward him. During his short stay in Pakistan, he seeks to see as many people as he can. At one point, he mounts a platform to speak vigorously to the large throng. From Pakistan, his Asian journey ends. Vice President Lyndon Johnson of the United States, an American leader, one man in 6 nations, united in a quest for understanding.